The clatter of ceramic plates echoed through the crowded diner as Sarah Mitchell balanced another tray, her worn sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floor. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the weight, but from exhaustion that had settled deep into her bones. At 23, she looked older, her eyes carrying shadows that spoke of sleepless nights and silent prayers. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting harsh shadows across her face as she forced another smile for table 7. She didn't know that in exactly 42 minutes, her entire life would change because of a moment she couldn't even remember. 3 years ago, Sarah had been a different person. She'd been a college sophomore with dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse, living in a cozy apartment near campus, texting her parents goodnight every evening. Then came the accident, the one that took her mother and father in a single, devastating moment on Interstate 95. The drunk driver who crossed the median had walked away with minor injuries. Sarah's parents didn't walk away at all. The insurance money barely covered the funeral costs. Her father's small business had been struggling, and they'd let some policies lapse. Within months, Sarah lost the apartment, dropped out of school, and found herself working double shifts at Bernie's diner just to keep a roof over her head. The roof, as it turned out, was a cramped room in a boarding house that smelled of mildew and broken dreams. But Sarah never let the bitterness show. Not to the customers who sometimes snapped their fingers at her like she was invisible. Not to the cook who complained about every special order, not even to herself in the mirror each morning. She'd learned that kindness didn't cost anything, and sometimes it was the only thing she had left to give. On this particular Tuesday evening, the diner was especially busy. A bus had broken down 2 blocks away, stranding dozens of travelers who'd flooded in seeking coffee and comfort food. Sarah moved between tables with practiced efficiency, refilling coffee cups, remembering orders without writing them down, and offering genuine smiles that sometimes made people pause and really see her. At table 12 sat a family that caught her attention, not because they were loud or demanding, but because of their quietness. The father, a man in his late 30s with tired eyes and calloused hands, studied the menu with an intensity that Sarah recognized. She'd seen that look before, usually on people counting dollars in their head, calculating what they could afford versus what they needed. Beside him sat a boy, maybe 7 years old, with curious dark eyes and an old jacket that was too small for him. The child watched everything with the kind of wonder that suggested he didn't eat out often. Across from them sat a woman, the boy's mother, Sarah assumed, who kept her gaze down, her fingers worrying the edge of a napkin. Sarah approached with her notepad. "Hi there, folks. Can I get you started with some drinks?" The father cleared his throat. "Just water for now, please. We need another minute with the menu." Sarah noticed how his eyes lingered on the prices. On impulse, she leaned in slightly. "Just so you know, we have a special tonight that's not on the menu. Meatloaf dinner with 2 sides, drink included. It's really good, and it's only $7.95. It wasn't a real special. Sarah would pay the difference out of her own tips later. She'd done it before for families that reminded her of her own, the ones who'd rather go hungry than admit they were struggling. The relief in the father's eyes was immediate. "That sounds perfect. 3 of those, please." As Sarah walked away, she felt the familiar ache in her chest. She knew what it was like to choose between a meal and next week's bus fare. Her tips tonight would be short, but she'd manage. She always did. The evening rush continued, and Sarah moved through it like a dancer who'd memorized every step. She didn't notice when the father at table 12 kept watching her, his expression growing more puzzled with each pass she made. She didn't see him lean down to whisper something to his son, or the way the boy's eyes suddenly widened. It was when Sarah was carrying a particularly heavy load of plates, 6 of them balanced precariously from wrist to fingertips, that the boy suddenly stood up from his chair. "Daddy," he said, his voice cutting through the diner's noise with a child's clarity. "Daddy, it's the same girl." Sarah paused mid-step, the plates wobbling dangerously. The father grabbed his son's hand, pulling him back, but his eyes locked onto Sarah with an expression she couldn't read. "I'm sorry," the man said, standing slowly. "But, this might sound strange, but have we met before?" Sarah carefully set the plates down at the next table, her mind racing. "I don't think so. I'm pretty good with faces." The boy tugged his father's sleeve insistently. "It is her, Daddy. The angel lady from the rain." And then, like a photograph developing in slow motion, Sarah remembered. It had been 6 months ago, during one of the worst storms of the year. Sarah had been walking home from her shift, no umbrella, no bus fare left after lending money to a coworker whose daughter needed medicine. She'd been soaked through, shivering, when she'd seen them huddled under a broken bus stop shelter, a man, a woman, and a small boy, their belongings in 2 threadbare suitcases. The woman had been crying. The man had his arm around the boy, trying to shield him from the wind. Sarah had stopped, though every logical part of her brain told her to keep walking. She'd approached them, and somehow, she still wasn't sure how, she'd convinced them to take the $63 she had in her pocket. Her rent money, her food money, everything she'd had left. For a hotel room, she'd said. Get out of this storm. Please. The man had refused at first, but Sarah had been insistent. She'd pressed the damp bills into his hand and walked away before he could refuse again. She'd spent that night at the diner, sleeping in a booth after her manager had locked up, and had picked up every extra shift available to make up the shortfall. She'd never expected to see them again. She'd never wanted credit for it. It had simply been the right thing to do. You didn't just give us money for a hotel, the man said now, his voice thick with emotion. You saved our lives that night. We'd just been evicted, lost everything. I'd lost my job when the factory closed. We were trying to get to my brother's place 3 states away, but we'd run out of money. My wife, Linda, she has diabetes. She was getting sick in that storm, and I was terrified. The diner had grown quiet. Other customers were watching now, witnessing something that felt sacred. The money you gave us, the man continued, we used it for the hotel like you said, and for Linda's medication. The hotel manager, he saw our situation and let us stay an extra night free. He helped me find a job at a warehouse nearby. We've been rebuilding ever since. We drove through town today on our way to visit Linda's mother, and Marcus insisted we stop at this diner. I had no idea. Linda was crying now, standing beside her husband. We tried to find you. We came back to that bus stop so many times, hoping to see you again. Sarah felt her own tears starting. I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have. No, the man interrupted gently. Not anyone. Most people walked right past us that night. You stopped. You gave us everything you had. The boy, Marcus, pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small, worn envelope. We've been carrying this, hoping we'd find you. Inside was $300 and a note that simply read, thank you for reminding us that angels exist. Sarah's hands shook as she held the envelope. It was more money than she'd seen at once in months. It was enough to catch up on her rent, to replace her shoes, to maybe sign up for one online class toward finishing her degree. But more than the money, it was the reminder that kindness mattered. That the moments when she chose compassion over convenience, generosity over self-preservation, those moments rippled outward in ways she couldn't predict or measure. Bernie, the diner's owner, had emerged from the kitchen, witnessing the entire scene. His gruff exterior had cracked, revealing something softer underneath. Sarah, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I'm doubling your hourly rate. And I want to help you finish that nursing degree. My daughter's a nursing instructor at the community college. Let me make a call. Around the diner, other customers began approaching. One left a $100 tip. Another offered information about scholarship programs. A woman who'd been sitting alone handed Sarah a business card. She ran a nonprofit helping young people finish their education after family tragedies. As Sarah stood there, surrounded by unexpected kindness, she realized something profound. She'd spent 3 years feeling like she was drowning, barely keeping her head above water. She'd given when she had nothing to give, helped when she needed help herself, smiled through the exhaustion and grief and loneliness. And somehow, impossibly, it had all mattered. The plates she'd been carrying when Marcus recognized her still sat on the nearby table, ordinary ceramic holding ordinary food. But in that moment, they seemed to represent something larger, the daily acts of service, the small kindnesses, the quiet dignity of showing up and doing your best even when life had knocked you down. Marcus hugged her tightly, his small arms fierce with gratitude. Thank you for being our angel, he whispered. Sarah hugged him back, no longer fighting the tears. Thank you for reminding me why kindness matters. That night, after her shift ended, Sarah walked home with her head held higher than it had been in years. The money would help, the job opportunities would help, but what healed something deep inside her was simpler. The knowledge that she'd done the right thing, that her parents would have been proud, that even in her darkest moments, she'd chosen to be the kind of person who stopped in the rain to help strangers. Sometimes, she thought, we carry more than plates. We carry hope, kindness, and the possibility of redemption. And sometimes, when we least expect it, someone recognizes us not for what we've lost, but for what we've given away.